So the next topic that we're going to discuss is about methods of persuasion. So consider the Lucas 2011 that writes about the audience can be persuaded by the speaker. The audience can be persuaded by the following reasons. Number 1, they perceive that the speaker has credibility. Number 2, they are convinced by the evidence presented by the speaker. And number 3, they are convinced by the speaker's reasoning. And lastly, their emotions are touched by the speaker's ideas or use of language. The following are some tips on how to enhance your credibility, how to use evidence, how to use reasoning, and how to observe ethics and emotional appeal in a persuasive speech. Number 1 is how to enhance your credibility. You can do this by sharing how well you read, investigate, or research the topic. Number 1 you need to do is explain how you became an expert on the topic. Like for example, you could share that in the beginning you didn't know much about your topic until you research about it. By saying your research on your topic, your audience will feel that you made an effort in building your credibility by collecting information. Number 2 is to connect your experiences, beliefs, values, or attitudes. You can do this by telling your audience that you have the same experience, beliefs, values, or attitudes. Like for example, in the beginning of your speech, you can emphasize to your audience that regardless of the background, status, age, gender, beliefs, and values, among others, you all have one thing in common, and then add that which you have in common. Got that, eh? And the third one that you are going to do is practice more often so you can deliver your speech with conviction. You can do this by exposing yourself more often to speaking situations such as reciting and reading announcements in class, introducing people in a program, hosting events, participation in debates, or acting as a spokesperson in a group. Participation in debates or acting as a spokesperson of a group. Also, simply practicing more often before your actual speech performance will increase your confidence and help you deliver your speech with conviction. The number 2 is how to use evidence. Number 1 you need to do is specify evidence. You can do this by citing statistics, research studies, and other valid and credible information. Like for example, when stating a fact, do not simply say a general detail. Instead of saying, there is a law that protects women and their children against violence, state the exact details as in, RA 9262 is an act that protects women and their children against violence. By specifying your evidence, you give the impression that you know what you are saying. Number 2, avoid outdated evidence. Your evidence should be on timeline. You can do this by reading and digging new evidence to keep yourself updated on significant facts and figures. Like for example, if you are arguing about social networking site addiction and you are using data taken from 2000 or earlier, your speech may not hold enough credibility and it may not retain the interest of your audience as well. Number 3 is to choose reputable or credible sources for your evidence. You can do this by carefully identifying and evaluating sources. Like for example, you are persuading your audience that your solution in improving the interest of readers in Philippine literature is the most efficient method. But you cite sources such as fan sites, wiki answers, Yahoo answers, or blogs. This creates a bad impression as it might come off that your arguments and points are based on unreliable facts. Number 3, how to use reasoning. You can do this by studying types of logical fallacies. The following are some of the most common errors of reasoning. Number 1, ad hominem. This happens when you attack the character of a person instead of his argument or personal attack. Example, Professor X does not deserve to be the head of this organization because he is separated from his wife. And how will you avoid it? When you give your rebuttal, focus on the argument of the person, not his or her character value. And number 2, circular arguments. This happens when the idea of stated arguments are repeated. Like for example, my mother is a good teacher because she teaches me well. And how will you avoid it? Do not repeat the argument, instead prove it. Number 3 is false analogy. This happens when two things, which might be alike in some respects, are compared and assumed to be similar in other ways. Example, President Aquino is the Socrates of the 21st century. How will you avoid it? Look at the characteristics, features, or components of two people or objects closely to see whether they can really be compared or not. Number 4, false authority. This happens when a statement of someone who is not an expert in the field in question is being used in an argument. Example, I avoid drinking coffee at night because of the advice of my English teacher. So how will you avoid it? Check properly the qualifications of the person being cited. Number 5, false cause and effect. This happens when the connection between two consecutive events are not clear. Like for example, because I attend a party, I got a high grade in my persuasive speech. So how will you avoid it? You have to clarify the connection between the events by explaining both backgrounds clearly. And the number 6 is hasty generalization. This happens when a conclusion is drawn from insufficient evidence. Like for example, the senator stuttered while giving his speech. Therefore, government officials are not good in public speaking. Sigmurin siyang stereotypes. And how will you avoid it? Provide enough pieces of evidence before making any conclusions. And lastly, the red herring. This happens when the answer does not address the questions. Like for example, the question is, should the president sign cyberbullying bill into law? And its answer is, the president has other priorities. So, kanang mo na siya nga, layo pa kayo sa question na yung answer. And then, how will you avoid it? So, you will avoid it by opposing arguments, instead, address them properly. 3 is how to use your emotional appeal. Number 1, internalize what you are saying. The audience will be more convinced of your message if you're also showing conviction in what you are saying. Like for example, if you use emotionally charged word but you deliver it in a monotonous voice, the audience will not see sincerity of your message. Instead, make sure to observe your nonverbal cues and to ensure that you believe in what you are saying. Number 2 in how to use your emotional appeal. Use emotion appropriately. Use it as an accessory only to make sure not to replace evidence and reasoning with pure emotion. Like for example, if you are making a speech on a question of fact, there is a little need to use emotional appeal to your audience since you are dealing with a fact and information.